All right, today we're jumping into something wild. We're breaking down a source that lays out a pretty dramatic hypothetical. What would it actually take for a military power to just kidnap a sitting president? So let's get right into it. Could it actually happen? The scenario we're exploring today doesn't just float the question. Nope, it gives a detailed, step-by-step playbook for how a shocking military operation like this could go down, really forcing us to think about what that would mean in the real world. And this isn't some far-off science fiction story. The source document puts this whole event on a very specific, very near future date, January 3rd, 2026. This isn't history, it's a projection of what could happen just a couple years from right now. The whole thing kicks off not with a loud bang, but with quiet, with darkness. A really sophisticated cyber attack hits Venezuela's capital, Caracas, and plunges the entire city into a total blackout. This is the first move on the chessboard, a strategic play to sow chaos and confusion. And of course, a mission this audacious has a name. The source calls it Operation Absolute Resolve. It's a name that's clearly designed to project total confidence and overwhelming, unstoppable force. So how would a raid like this actually play out? Well, this wasn't dreamed up as some simple smash-and-grab job. The document details a very precise, multi-stage military assault. Okay, so the plan is laid out in four very distinct stages. First, you have that citywide cyber attack we just talked about. That's immediately followed by airstrikes to take out any radar and air defenses. Then, using that darkness as cover, commandos from Delta Force, we're talking one of the U.S. military's most elite units, go in. And get this, from the moment they hit the door to the moment the target is captured, the whole thing supposedly takes less than 5 minutes. Now, if you're going to pull off something this extreme, you need a story to tell the world, right? You need a justification. The document we're looking at actually digs into two competing explanations for why this would ever happen. There's the official story, and then there's the one the document argues is the real one. And here is that conflict, side by side. The official reason, according to the scenario, is all about law enforcement. It's an action against an indicted narco-terrorist. But the source's central argument? It's that the true motive is something way more valuable, buried deep in the ground: oil. So how strong is this case for oil being the real driver? Well, the source doesn't just make a claim. It tries to build its case using history and some pretty hard data. And the entire argument really boils down to this one absolutely staggering number: 303 billion barrels. Just so we're clear, that is the estimated size of Venezuela's proven crude oil reserves. It's the largest on the entire planet. A number so big it can literally reshape global politics. And to put that number into perspective, just look at this. The data shows Venezuela has more proven oil than even Saudi Arabia, and it absolutely dwarfs what the United States has. We are talking about a resource of truly immense global importance. You know, this isn't some new conflict. The source traces a relationship that goes back a century, all built on oil. It even points out how U.S. refineries were specifically built to handle Venezuelan heavy crude. But that all changed after Venezuela nationalized its oil industry back in 2001, kicking out the big American companies and leading to years and years of sanctions. And then the source gives us what it presents as the smoking gun, this alleged, quote, the theft. The wording here is absolutely crucial. When you frame a sovereign nation taking control of its own resources as a theft from the United States, well, that reveals a really powerful belief about who that oil is seen to truly belong to. Okay, so let's zoom out. If something like this were to actually happen, what would be the global fallout? The source argues that an action like this would set an incredibly dangerous new precedent. It would challenge the very foundations of international law. This is about more than just one country. It's about whether the whole idea of national sovereignty even means anything anymore. Which brings us to a huge, huge question. Not just about international law, but about American law too. Could a president even authorize an operation like this legally? According to the source's analysis, the answer is a hard no. Domestically, it would have steamrolled the U.S. Constitution by skipping the required congressional approval for an act of war. And internationally, it would be a crystal clear violation of the UN Charter, which basically says you can't just use force against another country's independence. So as you'd expect, the scenario imagines the international backlash would be fast and it would be furious. And it wouldn't just be from the usual rivals like China and Russia. Key allies in Latin America and even Europe would likely join in to condemn the act, with some calling it what it looks like: New Age colonialism. And all of this really boils down to one final, pretty uncomfortable question about power and the international system we live in. When the very nations that wrote the rule book decide they don't have to play by it anymore, well, are there really any rules at all? It's definitely something to think about.